Hi, I'm Matt Towery for the Internet News Agency Insider Advantage and the Southern Political Report with our update today. With us on the phone is Gary Reese, who is our editor of Florida Insider, one of the many states where we have in-depth coverage of political news. Gary, I've been amazed in this last week as I watched the national talk shows and how they refuse to deal with the issue that's boiling up about Florida and the seating of the Florida delegates at the Democratic National Convention. What are you hearing, and what's the view down in Florida?
Well, I think, as we've been writing all along, I think the national media is sort of busy hopscotching from state to state, and they just sort of take whatever they take whatever they're told and go with it. And they've been told it doesn't count, and a lot of them haven't looked into it. In Florida, the center of the controversy right now is the #1 Democrat in the state, U.S. Senator Bill Nelson, who, as you know, Matt, fought this decision by the DNC originally not to have the delegates seated by the Florida presidential primary, and he lost a lawsuit. But basically, the DNC has put it back in Florida's hands and say, you know, maybe we can work something out. Maybe you can have a caucus to select the delegates. And Nelson has said unequivocally no to that. He cited the cost. But as you know, Matt, even if they were to do such a thing, it would be sort of pouring salt in the wound of those Florida Democratic voters who went to the polls and already had their say.
Well, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, more Democrats voted in the Florida primary than Republicans. Is that right?
They did. You had at least a semi-binding Republican primary. At least it was perceived as being fully binding or fully seating the delegates, and the Democrats was perceived as not. Some people didn't even know that there was a reason to vote at all. They had record turnout in Florida and many more Democratic voters. There are slightly more Democratic voters in Florida, but proportionally they voted in much greater numbers.
Do we know how many delegates, and I don't mean to put you on the spot because you probably don't have it in front of you, do we have any, just a guess out of how many delegates Hillary Clinton would pick up out of Florida?
I don't have that in front of me, Matt. It would be enough to make her to give her what would, by today's standards, be considered a substantial lead, though.
Right. So basically by Michigan, now admittedly in Michigan, you know, the other candidates' names aren't on the ballot, but in Florida, they had no choice. The names were placed on the ballots, and even though they claimed they weren't running, Barack Obama had ads that were running nationally that went down there. Clinton went down for campaign, not really appearances, but fundraisers, and there was obviously a movement afoot down there, and yet, I mean, how are they going to get to this convention? And I mean, the very state they fought over in 2000 and said was so important to democracy, they're going to suddenly say it doesn't matter?
Well, absolutely, and they've got growing problems in the Sunshine State. The Democrats do in the general election anyway. There's some indications from North Florida that a lot of the Democratic voters did not like Hillary Clinton. I don't know, you know, of course, people are saying she's not going to get the nomination now, but Governor Charlie Crist is immensely popular there, and whether he's appointed to be on the vice presidential ticket with John McCain or not, I don't think he will, but just the talk down there keeps the Republicans in the spotlight, and if you throw in some real Democratic anger, one of the ways the Democrats have gotten Democrats to turn out is to play up the resentments from the 2000 recount, and now if the shoe is on the other foot, they've got serious problems. Okay, now I'm going to throw something real quickly because we're going to be going to my live report from Puerto Rico in just a moment. But from the studio, I'm going to ask you real quickly, most underrated president. It's President's Day this week, most underrated president of the 20th century. George W. Bush. And I say that, I think you've heard me say this before, Matt, but today there was an interview by Der Spiegel in Germany with Henry Kissinger, and they were asking him about George Bush, and he said that there's going to be a real reassessment of him. And they said, are you saying that in 50 years historians are going to hold him in a kinder light? And he said it's going to be a lot sooner than that. And I know I hear the howls of religion out there, but you asked me, so I told you. I think that's great. I think it's good that somebody's willing to take that position. Guess who I'm going to say? I'm going to shock you beyond measure. Most underrated president, Jimmy Carter. Here's a reason why. Carter took over a lousy economy. It's always blamed on him, but actually Carter had it in the first place. Secondly, the whole situation in Iran was established as a disaster long before Carter came into office as well. He did manage to get a couple of things done, such as the peace accords, and I think he was very vigilant in his effort to try to get to free the hostages. And I thought Hamilton Jordan, in particular, was a very successful chief of staff who didn't get the credit that he deserved. Now, was Carter a great president? No way.
Is he going to go down in history as one of the worst? Probably so. But underrated, I think he was underrated. I think he probably did a better job than most people think. And people forget that if those hostages had been freed that last week, as people were talking, Ronald Reagan would have never been elected in the first place.
Absolutely. Absolutely, you're right.
And so, you know, obviously I love Ronald Reagan. I love John F. Kennedy. I've got my favorites. But I think Jimmy Carter's been underrated as a president. In terms of being a former president, I'm not so wild. Anyway, thanks. Let's now go to me in Puerto Rico, where they say this election is going to be decided. They say it's going to be decided in Puerto Rico, of all things. That's what the Clinton organization says. So via phone, here I am.